Just answering questions with Waptic video about questions people ask on my channel. It's based on a riff on just asking questions. This is just answering them. What is your opinion on whether or not if aeroplanes did not fly at night time, would it help to cool the Earth's temperature down? Apparently, air, vapor, clouds protect us from UV rays during the day, but keep them contained at night if there's cloud cover. What do airplanes do? Create clouds? I heard this from an unknown source, but I'm interested in your opinion. Airplanes put off in their combustion process from the following process. The atmosphere is mostly nitrogen, it has some oxygen, and it has some other gases. While people might claim carbon dioxide is a low gas and should not be paid attention to, that is a lie. By the way, it's not just an error. It does exist too. Hydrocarbon fuel contains hydrogen and carbon primarily, and other things like nitrogen and nitrates and stuff like that. Now, when it's burned in the air, the hydrogen and carbon in the fuel can combine with the oxygen and nitrogen in the air primarily. There are other combinations. So you can have hydrogen and nitrogen connect to each other. You can have carbon and nitrogen connect. Oxygen and carbon can connect to be carbon monoxide or dioxide. And you can have oxygen and hydrogen combined to be various gases, but mostly it'll produce water vapor. Hence the reason that if you look at your own car engine's exhaust pipe, it will put out rather hot condensed water. And so will the engine on a jet aircraft. If a jet is more efficient as far as fuel economy, this may have or may not have, depending on altitude, pressure, temperature, which are really related to each other. So you can almost, but not quite, say just altitude. It isn't just altitude, it isn't just temperature, and it is not just pressure. But at some sweet spot, you might end up with it burning the fuel more completely, producing less dangerous gases like carbon monoxide, and it might produce almost exclusively water vapor, which has another effect I'll get into, and it also might be more fuel efficient. Creating this sweet spot on purpose was done a lot because, not because of making the world a better place, but because the aviation industry wants to carry the least amount of fuel to get the most mileage. Period. So they pick an altitude that's optimized for the engine, and then they re-optimize the engine for that altitude. Eventually they ended up with engines that could be tolerable at low altitude and almost perfect at a very, very narrow band of altitudes. Now, at the same time this was happening, the military was trying to make sure they did not produce contrails from piston engines back a long time ago. Once we started using airplanes to fly over an area and drop bombs or do dive bombing, making sure they weren't easily spotted in the air became very important. So they would look for altitudes that produced no vapor trail no matter what they did, if possible, and they found out it was based on temperature, pressure, altitude, and moisture levels, and dust, or particulate matter in the air. If you don't have particulate matter in the air, water vapor will just stay a see-through vapor. It won't form clouds necessarily. It kind of does, but it doesn't really. And if clouds form, the water can fall out of the air. If they don't form, the water vapor can stay in the air and act like a greenhouse gas. Clouds and just the water vapor will keep in heat. Anyone saying that they can't has never gone outside at night on a cloudy night and then had it clear up suddenly and the temperature drop, or vice versa. It's a clear night, then the clouds come in and it stabilizes the temperature. It absolutely affects it. But it could also affect if it's just water vapor. And that will reflect infrared energy. Water vapor and clouds can and do block ultraviolet depending, and or absorb it and or react to it. Whether or not a cloud cover during the night will retain ultraviolet light, I don't believe so. I've seen an indication it can or can't. I couldn't find any definitive answer, so I'm not going to state an opinion because I don't have data. I haven't directly studied this. Disclosure, I have directly studied the output from crop dusters and from jet aircraft and may or may not have done it in a way that would be considered ridiculously illegal these days, but was tolerated by planes in the area. I also want to point out that the air efficiency for a Learjet versus a crop duster, you might be surprised that they're both very efficient because, again, they're trying to be very efficient for what they do. But yeah, the vapor coming out of the ass end of your average jet these days, and from 1978 forward and 1980s forward, two different times I may or may not be able to claim I was involved in this, it's mostly water vapor. And when it forms it can form a low altitude contrail too. Those are contrails, they're not chemtrails. Claims that chemtrails have to exist because contrails can't form unless it's a certain temperature, altitude, or pressure. That's technically correct, but that depends on you assuming a certain altitude or pressure or temperature are always consistent. They are not. And also certain other characteristics will just cause them to form temporary versus long-term contrails. And it doesn't matter if you like the answer. It's more complicated than you think. But somebody just waving, doing a hand wave, oh, it's all chemtrails, or it's all going to form clouds, is just lying. I don't have to be nice about it. We're done. It's been too many decades. And again, I have to point out, the origination for the chemtrail myth was to sell food supplements and poultices. That's the origin story for chemtrail. The chemtrail mythology started off as a sales pitch by a specific set of maybe 8 or 9 people on the internet selling supplements and defense materials, including, yes, there are videos on the internet, if you look them up, they're called Vinegar Warriors. They think that spraying vinegar at ground level will affect contrails 2 miles up. And again, attacking a specific population if you claim you're targeted by spraying stuff in the air that may or may not form a chemtrail, and may or may not fall, or may not get in the jet stream and go everywhere, is a really dumb thing, because that's kind of like shooting yourself in the face to try to hit somebody behind you. Chemtrails are bullshit. And weather manipulation. It's done through cloud seeding. But does this affect weather? The aviation industry has a 75% fuel efficiency improvement that you can test overall from 1967 to the year 2007, which works out to a nice round deliberately created here, 40 years. The emissions reduction is the same or very similar or related, but because of the increase of the number of flights, we actually have more pollution from airplanes than we did originally. But again, the efficiency also has a sweet spot where it produces less dangerous materials, hypothetically. But there are nitrogen oxides and there are hydrogen oxides, water, and they're not oxygen water. I like dihydrogen monoxide. So anyway, yeah, there are other materials put out just besides water vapor, but it puts out carbon dioxide, water vapor, both of which can be a greenhouse gas. And depending on whether it condenses or not, it stays in the air or not. And nitrogen, yeah. And I also want to point out that ultraviolet light will have an effect on these and either break them down or combine them or drop them out of the atmosphere or other, depending on what you're looking at. But anyway, there's an increase in flights, therefore there's an increase in CO2 emissions. In 1940, 0.7% of all the carbon dioxide emissions that human beings put out was literally just 0.7% of it was caused by airplanes. Now it's 2.65%. That's a big increase, but it's still only 2% of the total CO2 emissions. Other CO2 emissions, like coal-fired plants, which more efficiently use a hydrocarbon, by the way, put off a shit ton of radioactive gas, radioactive elements, and radioactive particulate material. Particulates are coming up now. And mercury. And there is an attempt to make clean fuels by getting them to where they don't put off particulate matter, which causes condensation, which may be good or bad, and or toxic material reactions. Vapor trail cloud formation can be triggered or is triggered by the altitude, temperature, or pressure at which an aircraft operates. And this can be adjusted to make a sweet spot at a different altitude. It can also be done on the fly in some, but not all, aircraft, so that the sweet spot occurs in a way that will be less damaging. Do you want it to produce particulate matter so it condenses and actually comes down as rain and maybe is shorter lived? Or do you think it's better not to have particulate matter, which could also be damaging, and have it stay in the air as a see-through gas layer that could cause global warming, or clouds that could maybe reduce it? Flying the airplanes at night retains more heat more often. Doing it during the day would reduce the heat that gets through just a little bit more than the retention factor. Should airplanes only fly during the day? A lot of pilots and a lot of safety experts have decided that may be a good idea for literally 100 different reasons. So some countries are thinking of, as of 2006 when this came up, of banning air flight at night for this and hundreds of other reasons, because flying at night, especially in bad weather, is ridiculously more dangerous than the relatively almost death-free flying during the day thing. I mean, it's literally day and night levels for that. So for that reason and hundreds of others I can't even look up, a lot of parts of the world are reducing or eliminating night flights if possible. That means you only travel in the airplane during the day for whatever the daytime is in the area. I guess you can chase the sunrise and sunset by flying at high speed, and you can land. You'd have to go only one direction, I guess. And you can land and then sleep at night. This might also make air travel less stressful and less likely to lower your life expectancy. So I can't see many things to hate about it, except it would be really inconvenient for shipping, which is excluded because if you reduce down commercial flights, the shipping flights, we ship things by airplane, could be prioritized to being only stuff that has to be there overnight, and then do everything by ground shipping or through air. Then we can do a video on how bad those are for the environment. Again, the gases form at a lower altitude. You have more control over them. They're more direct effects on us and less on the atmosphere. And again, fuel sources are being created that will create less reaction in the air or less reaction in the engines by synthesizing fuels. That's wasteful of energy, but it does produce an energy source that stores for a ridiculously long period of time and may be better for cars and high-altitude equipment like airplanes. No, we're not going to have electric airplanes anytime soon, and I hope we don't. So that's about it for this question. Now, why am I doing it about this question and this question only? Because my videos are getting too long, and I have to deal with the troll that's been nagging my account, and I didn't want to make the video half him and half this. This is a useful set of questions, and I don't know all the answers. My opinion is, do what works for the situation where it works well. In some places, flying at night would be better than during the day. It depends on the situation. But if you want an absolutist answer, if you want to offset your carbon footprint, again, I've said this, and yes, even green-oriented people don't like hearing this, plant anywhere from 200 to 300 trees through your lifetime. In your life. Spread it out. Assume you're going to live to be 60. How many trees is that per year to plant? Random locations where they're not going to cut them down for your lifespan. Find an area that has had all the trees cut down. Go out and plant trees that are native to the area so nobody will have a problem with it. Plant 100, 200, or 300. If you want to offset more than that to reduce the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, go out and plant double that number and then stop. Or find out how few you have to plant per year, plant that many every year, and then if you have extra time, always every year the same number, because you're only going to live a certain lifespan. Then go out and plant more in a burst whenever you get a chance to more than offset yourself and everybody else. Trees turn carbon dioxide into tree and dirt, and it really, really helps. Okay? Okay. And on top of that, maybe, recycle more and do all the other goody two-shoes things, but literally just go out and plant some trees. They don't have to be impressive. And I've claimed in the past I've offset myself only one time. Well, I'm not 60 yet, and I'm not going to die hopefully in the next 10 years, so maybe I should go out and plant some more trees. I'd like to. I'd like to have a hunk of dirt to plant it on that I own, too. Extra bonus. Anyway, but yeah, as far as whether this can cause chemtrails or whatever, or whether this is evidence of chemtrails, no. As well as whether or not we should change how we fly, yes. Is this stuff that's within our power to control and affect? Yes. Throwing your hands up and saying, I can't fix it, doesn't fix anything. And unfortunately, a lot of greenies out there do that really too quickly. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. And now you know why I didn't cover the troll right now.